Again, we say good morning once again. Now we're joined by our Facebook friends on 94.5 The Moose, WCEN, as well as WSGW Radio and Farm Service 79 Facebook. Also the Michigan Corn Growers Facebook, joining each and every one of them as well. My name is Terry Henney. I'm farm broadcaster at WSGW Radio, and you are watching Coffee with Corn, a series of meetings, a winter series of meetings put on by the Corn Marketing Program of Michigan. First and foremost, I want to say good morning to Executive Director of the Corn Growers Association, Jim Zook. Jim, good morning. How are you?
Very good, Terry. Good morning, and it's good to meet with you again. We had to kind of skip last week, but we're back here, and we're just finding these educational sessions extremely helpful for our growers. And I think again today they'll find some good, valuable information as we head into the next year's crop.
I've got to ask you before we get started. Back behind you, I see that shovel. Now, I'm assuming that has nothing to do with our program today, but what's the significance of the shovel, Jim?
Well, that shovel represents the second ethanol facility, the groundbreaking for the ethanol facility that I helped co-found and then manage in construction over in Lake Odessa. So that represents a lot in my life. It represents a lot of stress, heartache. Had a heart attack after getting it up and running. But there's a lot of joy and happiness to see it still going today and benefiting our producers here in Michigan.
And coming up in a couple of weeks, Jim, we're going to be talking a little bit more about ethanol as well. And I believe you're going to be a part of that program, right?
Yes, we are. And so we're kind of excited. We had some new policies that we just passed in our Corn Congress yesterday. We do have that going on. Typically, we have Commodity Classic, where we're in person at this time of year, but due to COVID, we had to do it virtually. It actually turned out very well. We did have some good policy discussion, and we are definitely paving the way for the future for our growers when it comes around ethanol. Despite we feel, despite what some of the media has around GM's battery announcement and going to all electric vehicles, we still believe that there'll be a place for the internal combustion motor, and we're just setting the stage for the future of that.
Very good. We'll look forward to that. That's in a couple of weeks. Today, though, your job is to help us moderate a little bit and pick up on some of the questions for our guests, right?
Yes, I'll help. As you have questions, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll get to those questions for our guests when they come in.
And again, for our folks that are joining us by Facebook, there is a comment section there, so you can type in your questions, and we'll be observing those as well. Now, each and every week, we've had the privilege to talk to a lot of specialists in the industry, individuals that are really important to the ag industry and have a lot of information to share with us to make our farming operation more efficient. And again, given the situation this year, 2021 promises to have its challenges, and when it comes to marketing as well as growing the crop. And hopefully our experts have been able to give you the information you need. And hopefully over the next few weeks, more information will come to you just before you get ready to hit the fields this year. Today, we have two guests. First of all, from Michigan Farm Bureau, I want to say good morning to Craig Anderson. Craig, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing quite well. Hopefully the roofers in the background won't disturb us too much.
Understand you had a little hail damage. Was that last fall?
That was actually last spring, but due to the lack of labor, it's taken this long to be able to get the roofing crews together.
Boy, isn't that the truth? It's been just tough all over to get anything, whether it's supplies or, in your case, work done. Well, I'm sure you got a pretty good quality headset and microphone there, but if there's a little pounding, we'll understand. We'll know what's going on, because we want to keep this rain out of your attic, especially we're looking at a pretty good chance of some thunderstorms next week.
Yes.
So hopefully they'll get her done quick. All right.
They do.
All right. And also along with us is Ryan Frost. Ryan is with the Michigan State Police. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And for once, I'm glad to see a state trooper.
Always a good time.
Always a good time. Your patrol takes you where, Ryan?
I actually cover 10 counties. I supervise Tri-City Post, Carroll Post, and West Branch.
So you get all around, and we're going to chit-chat a little bit about some things with you as we go through the program, in particular to the weight restrictions. We casually mentioned it before we actually started, and those are kicking in here pretty much all across at least the southern half of the Lower Peninsula, right?
Correct. They're moving up pretty quick. Usually it's a slow transition, but this year we've seen many counties jumping on starting March 1st. So.
Okay. Well, without further ado, let's throw the meeting over. First of all, to Craig Anderson with the Michigan Farm Bureau. Craig, take it away.
Thank you. Hopefully I get the right screen up here. Okay. So am I sharing?
Yep.
Looks real good, Craig.
All right. Well, for some reason it's locked. There we go. Okay, we're going to talk about driver's license requirements, and this is an area that we do have a fair amount of questions on a regular basis. And it's very important to understand that the information we're going to provide to you today is covered in the Farmers Transportation Guidebook. It is at the Michigan Farm Bureau website, and it is also available through the Michigan State Police Commercial Carrier or Enforcement Division now, and the Michigan Truck Safety websites as well. So as we move through, there are several exceptions that we need to look at, and I apologize for the screen. It just does not seem that it wants to move for me. Okay, so let's start with the traditional exemption to begin with. Now, the farm vehicle driver exemption is still out there, and it applies to the driver. So we have to take a look at what that driver's qualifications are, and there are also a couple of additional requirements that could apply here, and that includes the F endorsement. So the driver of a covered farm vehicle, and this is the second and newer exception, that exception applies to the vehicle itself. So both of those, we have to take a look at the individual situations that the operation is looking at. And when we look at minimum age, an awful lot of folks said, well, farmers are exempt and they don't have to follow anything. Well, that's just simply not true. So the first thing we need to look at is age. So when we're operating a single vehicle, over 10,000 pounds, the driver can be of the minimum age. So technically we could go down to that 16-year-old age to be able to operate some vehicles in terms of being a single vehicle. When we look at an articulated vehicle, and this is where we wind up getting into some difficulty, and that's with the pickups and goosenecks, for example. There, if we are over 10,000 pounds, then that farm vehicle driver does need to be at least 18 years of age. And then the one that is coming a little bit more in focus as anhydrous is being used is that anytime we're operating a vehicle requiring a placard, we do need to be 21 years of age. So that's fairly important in terms of understanding what we need to look at in terms of our own drivers. So let's look at how we would use that traditional exception, the farm vehicle driver exception. It has to be controlled and operated by the farmer, their employee, or family members. So it's fairly broad as long as they're under the operation and control of that farm operation. and then transporting agricultural products. And I highlight products because there are two definitions we have to understand. The agricultural products definition is broader than the agricultural commodities definition that you will see in just a minute, and is not used in a for-hire operation. Here too, we wind up getting a significant amount of misunderstandings. In many cases, farms will haul their own product, but they'll also haul other people's products for hire, or they may in fact get paid for their services from the buyer of the product. So recognize that the farm vehicle driver exception only applies if we are operating in a not for hire configuration, and again, not carrying those hazardous materials. Now, the issue that we've had for several decades almost is that this provision applies within 150 miles of the farm, 173 statutory miles. So you can take and draw a circle around your operation for the 173 statute miles, and that gives you an idea of where you have the ability to operate under this provision. Now, I mentioned the F endorsement. The F endorsement is actually an exemption from the standpoint of our traditional CDL requirements. So when we look at vehicles, farms tend to do a whole lot of, well, sometimes strange and odd situations. But we do need to take a look at that vehicle and at that driver to make sure we know what we're looking at doing. So where we need an F endorsement, what you're looking at is that we have very similar requirements in terms of the farm vehicle driver exception. It has to be controlled and operated, not necessarily owned. So we do have the opportunity for lease vehicles, for example, that could fall into the farm vehicle or the farm driver exception. Used to transport the agricultural products, so it remains within there, not for hire, operated within the 150, but the last one is what we have to take a look at. So if I have a combination vehicle with a power unit over 26,000 gross vehicle weight rating at that point in time, then I would need an F endorsement. And understand, this is for hauling a trailer of any size. So we have to take a look at the power unit, not the whole vehicle, but just the power unit. And if it is over that 26,000, you do need to have the F endorsement. So taking a look at the cab door is where you will find the gross vehicle weight rating. There are some vehicles that it's in a slightly different place, but generally it's in that cab door area. So let's move on to the covered farm vehicle exception. And remember, this is the newer one under MAP 21. So this applies to any commercial motor vehicle, including an articulated, but excluding the placarded loads. So that too is important. So for example, if we're hauling that anhydrous tank behind a pickup, it is a placarded load. The covered farm vehicle exception would not apply to that activity. Operated again by the owner, operator, an employee, family member, very similar to the farm vehicle driver exception. But here we're transporting agricultural commodities to and from the farm. We also have to have a special designation. Now in the state of Michigan, there are essentially 3 plates out there that would identify that structure. The older one on your right, the log farm plate, that actually includes both a log plate and a farm plate, and that is being replaced by the plate that is on the left with just the farm plate. And then the center is the special farm plate. And it's important to understand the designations and some of the reasons behind which ones we can use. So a log plate can be used in a for-hire operation. So understand that under the exception, the ability to use it for commercial purposes does not exist and allow us to use the covered farm vehicle. Remember, this is the vehicle exception that we're looking at. Likewise, from the standpoint of milk plates, the milk plates too may be used in a for-hire operation. Therefore, the 2 that we have are the farm plate and the special farm plate as designations here in Michigan. Yes, we have asked the Secretary of State, as many other states have done, to provide some form of certification that an operation is using a vehicle for agricultural purposes only, but we do not have that at this time. So when I talked about the difference between commodities and farm products, the highlighted in purple area are the additions to the farm products. So from the standpoint of the farm vehicle driver, we can add several products in terms of what we're looking at. So moving back to the covered farm vehicle and what we are actually exempt from, we are exempt from commercial driver license standards, requirements, and penalties. We're also exempt from the drug and alcohol testing protocols, physical qualifications, medical cards, hours of service, and the inspection, repair, and maintenance. However, folks recognize that we are still covered by Part 393, which are the parts and accessories. So that vehicle needs to be in proper operating condition when we are operating it on the highway. And from an officer's standpoint, we do want to make sure that that officer, when they look, you're required to have that vehicle in safe operating condition at all times. And that's what you would want to look at. So many operations say, well, wait a second, I'm exempt from the inspection and repair. All you're exempt from is the record keeping and the daily types of records that we're looking at, but that vehicle still needs to be in proper repair. So when we look at not used in the operations of a for-hire motor carrier, in many cases we do have farms that do have commercial activities in addition to their farm side of the equation. So we do need to recognize that from the standpoint of the farm operations, we do have a little bit of a question as to if I have two different operations, can I have individual vehicles? And this time we believe that answer is yes, you can. There are a couple of situations where we can work with other farms, and that is the crop share or farm lease agreement structure. And also we have to understand that it is that part of the product or materials that is owned by the tenant and that you would be transporting the landlord's portions of the crop. So how that all fits together, it really is an individual type of determination as to where and when that would apply. So when we look covered farm vehicle, we do have the opportunity in interstate. So historically, our exceptions kind of ended at the state line. Now, if we have a vehicle that is 26,000 pounds or 26,001 pounds or less operating in interstate, we have the ability to cross that state line. Also, greater than 26 operating intrastate. So remember, our farm vehicle driver exception had a 150-mile provision on it. With this exception, we can operate anywhere in the state. Greater than 26,000 operating interstate, but then we return to the 150-mile structure in terms of operating that commercial vehicle over 26,001 pounds. So the CDL requirements, this comes out of the Farmer's Transportation Guidebook. I would highly recommend that you pull it out, study it, understand what, when, and why you are operating. So with that, that's kind of the driver's license structure, and I'll open it up for questions.
I didn't see any questions so far. Craig, Jim, have you seen any questions at all?
So, yeah, I do have, what endorsement does a driver of a farm plated truck single combination need? I think let's just re-verify that.
If you're looking under the farm vehicle driver exception from a single vehicle, not a combination vehicle, and then you have to take a look at the combination vehicle, is the power unit over 26,000. If that power unit is over 26,000, then you would need an F endorsement. From the standpoint of the regular endorsements are part of a CDL requirement. So the other endorsements would not apply if you're operating under these two exceptions. If you're operating in the commercial side of the equation, hauling for other people, or in a for-hire situation, hauling ag products, then our regular endorsements would apply, and of course the CDL would apply as well.
Then the next question is, what endorsement does drivers of farm-plated set of doubles need?
They are exempt from the CDL, provided that they fall within these two qualifications, but generally that power unit in doubles is going to be over 26,000, and they would need a minimum of the F endorsement. Now, I would highly recommend that all of our operations seek to have the F endorsement. It essentially is the CDL test without going into the additional driver and testing, the physical testing and driving requirements. So no, I'm not a fan of putting someone who's 18 years of age into doubles without any training. I would highly recommend that you at least go through the F endorsement structure. Ryan, do you have anything to add on that?
I believe you've covered it. Sounds good.
I see we have a couple more questions here that are popping up, Jim.
So we'll wait on, so the one on the DOT number, we'll wait until Ryan actually goes through his presentation. The other question, I think also about the medical, we'll, I guess, let's wait on that until we get to the end. And maybe what we'll do is some of these questions, let's go ahead and actually have Ryan. And because some of these I think are going to cross over between Ryan and Craig. So,
good suggestion. Ryan, why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Well, I'm going to talk about size and weight for commercial vehicles. I have a couple pages here I'm going to display. Almost everything that we're talking about, that Craig's talked about, is in that farm guidebook. If you don't have one, you should obtain one. It has great information in it. Let's see, share. Can you guys see that normal loading maximum page I have up?
Looks good, Ryan.
So a lot of questions are out there is, what's the maximum allowable for my train? What's the maximum allowable for the spread? And really the easiest way for me to explain that is these three highlighted categories. If you're over 80,000 pounds and you have a spread, which is 9 feet on either side of an axle, you're going to get 18,000 pounds for that axle. If you have a group that would be less than 9 feet in between axles, but more than 3.5 feet, you're going to get 13,000 pounds for each one of those axles. We also have a tandem option. If you have a tandem like the set of your drives, you're going to get 16,000 pounds for that tandem, but you're only going to get to use that for one set of tandems for your operation. So if you have two tandems, you're going to get 13 and 13 for that second tandem. If you have something less than 3.5 feet between axles, then you're going to get 9,000 pounds, but that's pretty rare for a semi-truck operation. If we have vehicles that were operating on expressways, highway, M routes, there is a bridge formula that's calculated for vehicles under 80,000 pounds, and that's listed here. And that's just going to change and fluctuate by the amount of distance between the groups of axles that you have. I have a couple pictures here to help show you guys what I'm talking about. Most trains are going to look like these configurations. We're going to use the weights that are at the top here for designated loading. 15.4, it shows for a steer. That's a standard tire. Most farm trucks are going to have an oversized tire. So they're going to get 18,000 pounds for that steer. Then that first tandem, the drives is going to get 16 and 16. And then the group here, because they are below 9 feet in between each axle, they're going to get 13,000 pounds for that group of 3. And like I said, for that tandem on the top picture there, the second set of tandem is going to get 13 and 13 because we've already used the tandem exemption on the drives. So we're going to get 13 and 13 on that rear tandem, and that 3 axle group at the back is going to be the same as the first trailer, where it's going to get 13,000 pounds. The second picture here shows a spread on the second trailer, where you can see that there's 9 feet in between those axles, so you're going to get 18,000 pounds for both of those single axle locations. And as you see in the first trailer, we're going to get 13 on all the groupings that are under 9 feet, and the tandem again gets 16 and 16. That's pretty much what I have for weight on trucks. It's simple, but it's not all at the same time. Nothing's really changed as far as weight goes. A few years ago, the legislation has pushed out different fine categories for misloads. And a misload is going to be a violation of weight on a single or multiple axles, but not over gross. So we have a couple different categories of weight fines. One would be over gross, so that would be adding up all of our axles on the truck and then adding up all of our allowable weights for that combination. If you're over your allowable, then you're over gross. If you're not over your allowable, but you're over on a couple axles, that's what we call a misload, where we can still get a citation weight fine for those multiple axles that are overweight. The fine category changes by the amount that you're overweight, but it's listed on the Michigan compiled laws. So if we have questions about that, I can get into that a little bit more, but if not, farmers do have another exemption that allows them a 10% allowance for those misloads. As long as we're not over gross, we get an extra 10% on each one of those axles that may be misloaded, because we understand that you guys are coming out of the fields. You're not going over scales loading like a manufacturer transportation would be. And that's all I really had for weight. Do we have any questions on weight?
Ryan, why don't you go ahead, because there's a number of different questions.
Okay.
We'll finish up and then we'll come back to those questions.
Okay. That was pretty much what I had. I know we had a couple other questions that were listed. We were going to talk about. Me and Craig were going to kind of jump back and forth. One of those was DOT numbers, and let's see if I can find my guide here.
So then that question is also depending on what farm plate you have, do you need DOT numbers, or are all farm plates exempt from a DOT number, or what? And then does it matter whether or not you're hauling from a field to a farm, or from a farm to a commercial enterprise that maybe is shipping grain or something across state lines?
So Jim, I do have a few slides. Ryan, if you want me to put those up, and I can put them up and we can talk through them.
Yep, I was just going to share the transportation guidebook, the tables that we had created. I don't know if your slide's better than that.
I add in some of the additional requirements that apply to the UCR, for example,
okay,
as well. Okay, so when we look at marking, we get a lot of questions, and the regulations have changed since 2015. So in the state of Michigan, what we're looking at is that if you have a vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating of 26,001 or more, with or without trailer over 10,000, and then that changes to more than 10,000 for the vehicle in interstate commerce. So those are the two key levels. A vehicle in Michigan, in other words, intrastate only, you would be looking at 26,001 or more, and we would need to have a DOT number. And then if we go across state lines again, a vehicle over 10,000 would need to have that. And then any vehicle that would require a placard. So for example, if I have a pickup hauling an anhydrous tanker, I would need a DOT number for that placarded vehicle. Many people will say, well, wait a second, what happened to the 5,000 or the name city state? That disappeared in 2015. So we still have an awful lot of vehicles that were marked and you received your DOT number prior to 2015, and that's where there's a fair amount of information out there. Now let's look at the intrastate vehicle. Transporting passengers or property. So we do have operations, for example, let's say we're raising sugar beet and we're going to be transporting passengers to go out and weed those fields. There we have any vehicle that transports 16 or more, including the driver, that would require a DOT number as well.
So Craig, do you have something up on the screen that we're supposed to be looking at? Because we just have your markings and registration of all we see.
Thank you. I apologize. For whatever reason, my regular shifting doesn't work. I have to go to the panel rather than the mouse, so I apologize. So that's the screen that I was looking at. And so let's give you a little bit of an opportunity. This is a fairly common situation out there. So when we look at it from the standpoint of the gross vehicle weight rating, we, in terms of that trailer and the truck, are going to be under the 26,000 and would not need to have the DOT number. So let's change that a little bit. Take a look at the actual weights of the vehicles. Still, we're under it. Now let's move up and put, for example, a John Deere 4010 on there, a fairly common older tractor. Then that vehicle would in fact be over the 26,000 and we would need a DOT number for that vehicle. So again, we have to pay attention to what we're doing, the vehicle and its actual weight structure to determine when we would need a DOT number. Under Part 390, and this is where we go across state line, Jim, to talk about our opportunity under both the farm vehicle driver and the covered farm vehicle exemption going across state lines. There we have to drop that down to that 10,000 or more, whichever is greater, and understand that this is the gross vehicle weight rating, gross combination weight rating, or gross vehicle weight or gross combination. And then we also have a situation where we would be looking at a for compensation. So if you're having that sugar beet field hoed and it is a farm labor contractor, there it would be 8 or more, including the driver, that would need a DOT number on that vehicle. And there are some additional provisions under the code for migrant seasonal workers. And then any vehicle requiring placard, and again, moving in the interstate transportation. So let's take a look at some of the marking issues. This is fairly straightforward. The code does require on the federal side that the DOT number be visible from 50 feet away and be in contrasting colors. So when we look at contrasting colors, in many cases, DOT officers point out to me, come on, Craig, are you really telling me that's in contrasting colors? So we do need to have it visible. And folks, when you think about it, the officer is going to look to see whether you have an intent to comply. And we do want to make sure that this is visible. They're not looking at it to mark it down, driving alongside you and do a check. But it does say that, yes, I am interested in making that compliance. So there's no prohibition on using a DOT truck for personal use, and implements of husbandry are exempt from DOT number requirements. Now, we did change the definition of an implement of husbandry, so there are more vehicles that will remain within a commercial vehicle structure now. So please recognize that if it is a truck first, then it could likely need a DOT number, even though we're using it for, let's say, a manure spreader possibility out there. We do have the opportunity to go up and make changes to our registration, and that's one of the other areas where we have a problem. If we're operating in interstate commerce, we do need to update our MCS 150 on a biennial basis. And this gives you kind of an information slide of what is on there. They did recently change kind of the format of that, but in interstate commerce, we do need to change that on a biennial basis. Now, the unified carrier registration structure is kind of attached on and off, but if we are operating within interstate commerce, it is very important that you register and pay the UCR fee on that. Now, for vehicles that are operated only in intrastate commerce, you would not be paying the UCR fee for those vehicles. All right, so from the standpoint of the intrastate vehicles, now we go back up to the 26,000. So if we're operating commercially, in other words, for hire, that's what we would be looking at in terms of making the changes. And then also recognize that if we are only a farm operation with no commercial vehicles in the fleet, at that point in time, the way the code reads, we really should update our MCS 150 when we have changes in our fleet, even though we wouldn't be paying for the UCR because they're all intrastate ag vehicles on that. So the unpaid UCR fee, this has come up fairly regularly where Michigan drivers go down to Indiana, Ohio, or even Wisconsin, and they find that they are not enrolled in the UCR structure, haven't paid the fee, and the officer can in fact red tag the entire fleet for not being in compliance. So please pay attention. If you are in interstate, do pay that UCR fee for the vehicles that are engaged in the interstate transportation. Ryan, do you have any comments to add to that?
Generally in Michigan, just for an understanding of that penalty for UCR, it is a misdemeanor charge. It's not just a civil infraction with fines. So it is very critical that that is taken care of, because both the driver and the company can be charged with a misdemeanor for that UCR fee. We had one more question that we talked about covering, and that was annual inspections. Annual inspections required to be done, obviously annually, on all commercial vehicles over that 10,001 pounds. One of the questions I noticed was, can an owner operator do their own inspections? And they can, they just have to be self-certified, and that certification document signed by that person completing the inspections.
And there now are many of the school structures out there, many commercial shops that will provide some additional training to go through and make sure that you can meet the brake inspection. But in the federal code, and all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank on the code number, but it's 393. Ryan, do you remember the citation number for the brake inspector qualification?
I do not right offhand.
If you do just a search for Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act brake inspector, it will bring you up there so that you do properly document and maintain on file that you have the experience or training to do the brake inspections for the vehicles that you have in your fleet. So Ryan, there's another question in terms of the medical card for special farm plate. Generally, the medical card is a requirement of a CDL. And since if you fall within the farm vehicle driver or the covered farm vehicle exception, you would not need a medical card. Now, where some of the challenges are arising is Secretary of State changed the method in which we are dealing with this, and the medical card essentially is part of the license. And so to maintain your CDL, the Secretary of State is saying you need to have the medical card. So that is where some of the problems are coming in. We are working with Secretary of State to try and modify that, but that's where we get the greatest number of questions. Ryan, any thoughts?
Sure. The Secretary of State gives you an option to claim exempt when you have your CDL, and this would be one of those categories where you would be exempt. So they would not require you to have a medical certificate to maintain a CDL. It would have a restriction on your license saying that you can't leave the state of Michigan with that CDL as it being valid, because they require that medical certificate federally to be attached to the driver's license. But Michigan allows you to claim an exempt status for that CDL. So you can maintain your CDL, but not submit a medical card.
So Ryan, on the annual inspections, could you go through and talk us through the inspection requirements for generally the commercial vehicle and the annual requirements, and then our covered farm vehicle exception?
The annual inspection criteria, is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
So I can't really I don't have anything to run through that with.
So what we're looking at in terms of the annual inspection, the covered farm vehicle, again, we have the exception from the record keeping requirements in terms of the annual inspection. However, that vehicle needs to be in compliance at the time of a traffic stop. So I would highly recommend that even though we have a qualification, you want to do that annual inspection and have it documented to give us some benefit in terms of an incident that may occur on the road.
Yes, so the vehicles can be inspected by us, even though they are exempt from a inspection document. But all the items of maintenance can be inspected by us and then cited for any defects. So if there's bald tires, there's brakes out of adjustment, even though there's not an inspection document created, those are still violations and citable to the driver or company.
So Jim, do you want to give us the questions, or Terry, or how do you want to proceed?
One thing I noticed, guys, I don't know, Jim, if you noticed it, but one person had asked for the link for the self-certification for inspection. Is that available?
I will look it up real quick. It is on the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website.
I know you guys did answer quite a few of the questions. Jim, is there any in particular that jumps out at you that we need to have Craig or Ryan cover?
So the only question we got, another question we have is, where does a farm tractor fall into any of this? It's maybe pulling 2 grain wagons.
A farm tractor is an implement of husbandry, and as such, we are able to pull 2 farm trailers. So that farm tractor, in other words, the actual agricultural tractor, is also exempt from with weight requirements as well. Recognize that where we are drawing equipment on the road, that the safety chain requirement does apply, whether we're pulling a disc, a hopper box, a manure wagon. That safety chain requirement does in fact apply to that tractor hauling equipment as well. So DOT numbers are not required, and driver's license are generally not required. However, there is a provision in the state code that provides that driver's license is not required, but the driver must be eligible for a Michigan driver's license. So there could be workers that are from a foreign state or country, and they would have to be eligible for a Michigan driver's license to operate without a driver's license on an implement of husbandry. Normally isn't an issue, but we have had reports of several tickets over the years for that provision.
So what happens if a individual, and they may or may not be a family member or family-owned they have a family-owned farm plate, special farm plate. Do they need an F endorsement? It seems like years ago, maybe they were told that they don't need an F endorsement. I'm assuming if you don't have an F endorsement, then you're going to fall into the rules and regulations under commercial vehicle.
That goes to whether or not the vehicle is exempt under the covered farm vehicle or the driver is exempt. In either case, you wouldn't have the regular endorsements if you're under those exemptions. Now remember that if the power unit in a combination vehicle is over 26, then that family member would need an F endorsement, as would any of the employee or other drivers of that vehicle. So we really go back to, are we hauling it for the farm in the normal operations of the farm in those covered areas? If so, then the additional endorsements would not be required.
So we got another question going back to the weights. How does a Michigan special power unit versus traditional 12,000 front, 40,000 rear differ in gross weight?
Ryan, I'll leave that to you if you're able.
I'm rereading the question, trying to understand what we're talking about.
Okay.
I was frantically looking for this document that, of course, the feds have moved from their normal spot on the website. So
I will start looking if you take this one.
A special power unit versus a traditional 12K front axle. Can we ask for information on that? What are we talking about? If most power units are going to get 15,400 for each steer, unless they have oversized tires, and they're going to get 18,000 pounds. So I'm not sure what we're referring to. And as far as the rear, we're going to get 32,000 pounds for a set of drives, which would be at 16 and 16 for each drive.
I think maybe, Ryan, maybe what would be best is if we can have your contact information, we can pass that on to the individual and they can ask maybe a further follow-up on that one. So
definitely.
I think another question we had about the tractor pulling a tandem trailer, I think we covered that. I'm assuming we did in there. Again, that's going back to your manual that actually shows all of the different configurations and where and what the weight limits are.
Yes, the photos that I showed of the weights is from the Truck Driver's Guidebook, which is available on Michigan Center for Truck Safety. It's got lots of different configurations of vehicles and how they apply for weight. And it also lists below the Frost Law restricted weight for those vehicles.
So maybe do you have a picture that shows a straight truck? So that with a tandem axle and a third lift axle for weight limits. Okay, there we go.
So for a regular straight truck that has the tandems, you're going to get 15.4 on the steer. Unless you have oversized tires, you get 18,000 pounds. And then you have 9 feet in between that steer and the tandem. So we're going to get 16 and 16 on that tandem. If it has a lift axle in front of the tandem, it's going to be like this bottom picture where we then get 13, 13, and 13 on those rear groups.
Okay. How do the fines work when you're over gross weight?
Over gross, your fines are going to be calculated pennies per pound. So it's going to depend on how far overweight you are. The more overweight you are, the higher the pennies per pound is. And we would just multiply the amount that you're overweight by that penny category.
Okay.
And I have, I can share that real quick if that's someone's interest here. This is the fee per the law, where it talks about 3 cents if per pound for each pound over 1,000 pounds, but not to exceed 2,000 pounds. And then it goes to six cents per pound for over 2,000 to 3,000, and then so on.
So the question is, the 10% misload doesn't apply from farm to elevator for over gross weight? Question.
The 10% allowance only applies if you're not over gross. If you're over gross, that 10% is out the window.
Okay. Another question is, do you need to file a Schedule 1 Form 2290 with the Secretary of State for schedule of heavy highway vehicles?
That is an administrative thing with Secretary of State. I don't have that answer. That's something that you'll have to ask Secretary of State, unless Craig has that answer. You're muted, Craig.
Okay.
You're talking about the heavy use tax, I think, for Secretary of State.
Yes. So hopefully it's up there.
Yes.
All right. So what we're looking at is that if you have the gross weight over 55,000 or more, then the tax form is in play. So for several years, they didn't require it. Now they are requiring it. However, where you look at that, we do have a qualification, and this is why it hadn't come up for many years. So if the mileage use, that commercial vehicle is 5,000 or less, if you are a for hire operation, or 7,500 miles or less for agricultural vehicles, you would not need to pay that. But you would have to specify that. That's what Secretary of State is asking for, that 2290 form.
I guess I thought we covered this, but the question again was annual inspection of farm plate, special farm, and the trailer. Are they needed?
The plate designation does not change the need for the annual inspection. The only thing that changes it is if you fall into that covered farm vehicle exemption.
And understand that it is part of the covered farm vehicle exception, but we would be doing our annuals if we're a farm vehicle driver exception.
So another question then on the driver themselves and the driver's license. Can you drive with a Class A without a medical card, or do you need something else, some other designation with the Class A CDL to be able to do that?
Can you repeat that one more time?
So can I drive with a Class A CDL without a medical card?
You can if you fall under the covered farm vehicle, but if you are a farm vehicle driver and you're required to have an F endorsement, then you don't have an F endorsement, you have to follow all the rules of the CDL. So you have to have a CDL plus a medical card.
So if you do that, you will need the F endorsement in order to not have the medical card with the farm vehicle.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. If someone had been convicted of drunk driving and lost their license, they would not be able to drive a farm tractor on the road. Is that correct?
If they're not eligible to have a license, then they would not be able to operate on the road.
Okay. Would it be possible that we could have copies of your presentations, especially probably Craig, for sure?
Sure. I'll send the current revised copy over when we get done here.
And everything I showed you guys was from the Truck Driver's Guidebook or the Farm Guidebook.
Okay.
Those are both available on Michigan Center for Truck Safety And I believe Craig said they're available on his website as well.
Okay, good. I think we already discussed this one, but just reiterate it about the farm, have the name on the farm trucks. Are you required?
You would not specifically be required from the standpoint of the vehicles under 26,000 for intrastate commerce. From the standpoint of the DOT number and the name that is in your MCS 150, and that can include DBAs as well that you add in. You could use any of the DBAs that are listed for your carrier. And that would be for over 26,000 intrastate or over 10,000 interstate.
Another question on DOT numbers. Do they need to be updated?
Through the biennial updating, if you are an interstate carrier, and then by virtue of the wording, you would need to update when you change your fleet for farm vehicles. So you should, anytime you change the number of vehicles, you should update your MCS 150.
This one maybe goes to more on the farm equipment, but the question is, when a farmer is going down the road with his farm equipment, is there any liability on the farmer for his equipment if he needs to actually get over into someone's yard in order to avoid other traffic or obstacles like hanging tree limbs, mailboxes, etc.?
From the standpoint of liability, your farm general liability policy will provide some coverage. And then from the standpoint of lawns, it really is going to be a function of where the road right of way is. So on the rural roads, typically you're looking at 33 feet from the center, but any damage to the road and road right of way can also have a liability. So for example, if you take a sign down, yes, the county is going to come after and ask for the repayment. And that's where your general liability policy would come in. Now, from the standpoint of protections in terms of you're avoiding someone, remember that during daylight hours, we do have the opportunity to be across the center line where we have obstructions that would cause a problem. So you do want to plan your route, try and go on the side that doesn't have mailboxes to have your vehicle remain within your lane to the best that you can.
And I think you actually touched on really maybe what the question was around about any liability if you cross the center line as well. So I think you covered that as well. If you are an exempt on the 2290 because you are under 7,500 miles, you need to completely fill out the 2290 form.
The Secretary of State's offices around the state are saying yes. We're trying to get kind of a better information as to what we need to do in terms of obtaining our 7,500 mile exemption.
Okay. Covering loads. Again, question is, if you're hauling some other commodity like tomatoes or potatoes, do those need to be covered when on the highway?
We do not have a tarping requirement for bulk agricultural commodities. However, if you're looking at tomatoes, potatoes, sugar beets, when we leave the field, they must be at least 6 inches below the sideboards all the way around when we leave the field. So if I am leaving and I have them right up to the edge of the sideboards, I don't need a tarp, but I am in violation. And then also understand that if you lose any load, you will have an unsecured load ticket as opposed to failure to tarp ticket.
Okay.
And that would include grain and beans on the backboard as well, falling off or sideboards. So any of our product that we lose can lead to a non-secured load ticket.
Okay, I think that's actually all the questions that I got, and even some that texted to me. I guess
Was
one
able
last
I was able
follow-up.
to come up with the annual inspection inspector certification. It looks like the feds have removed it off their website. JJ Keller has it on their website, but you have to pay for it. So I'll show you what it looks like, and then whoever is looking for it can go on to JJ Keller and locate it.
And I also pull it up, put it in the chat from the CSA side. So yes, FMCSA pulled it down, but there is a qualification on the CSA site that I posted in the chat.
And JJ Keller has it for sale for, looks like 90 cents. So
right.
Okay. Any last? Let me see. If you're hauling silage and driving slower so it doesn't blow off, what miles per hour do we need to turn on our hazard light?
One of the areas that we have within the code is that chaff, which in many cases we do have with silage chopping, we can have some chaff blowing off of our load, whether it be hay or other types of products. Where you're looking at silage, where we do have it is where clumps of silage fall off the truck. In many cases, they land on the cab of the truck, slip off. That is an unsecured load. And so we don't have to tarp, and the speed is immaterial. It is whether or not we actually are losing our silage that can lead to whether or not we have an unsecured load.
Okay. Well, Terry, I think we've covered all the questions. So I appreciate all the questions that have come in today. I find this was very helpful, probably even to a point where it maybe confused some people a little bit more. But I think it's definitely trying to take a stab at trying to make sense out of all of these regulations. So I will hand it back to Terry.
And again, thank you very much, guys, for all the information. Craig, Ryan, getting in contact with you, how do we go about doing that?
For me,
go ahead, Greg.
If you go to the Michigan Farm Bureau website, all of our contact information is there. Just type in my name and you'll be able to email your questions to me.
And Ryan?
If you contact the Tri-City Post in Freeland, they will direct you to me, or my email address is frostr@michigan.gov.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Very interesting. As you could tell, a lot of questions, and I'm sure there'll be more questions as we go through the year. So again, thank you very much for your input today. We really appreciate it. Now up on the screen, you can see we have our box up closing poll. We'd like you to evaluate our presentation today and let us know if you considered it valuable. And if so, you'd like more information, then you can contact our folks at Farm Bureau, or as Ryan said, the Michigan State Police. That would be the Freeland Post, and they'll probably defer those questions right over to Ryan. So again, thank you very much, guys, and thank all of you for attending today. Please take a moment and fill out our closing poll box right now. Coffee with Corn is a presentation of the Corn Marketing Program of Michigan. This is going to be a very busy day for the corn growers. Jim, while I have you here, coming up, well, this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we've got a VIP meeting, and hopefully a lot of folks have registered for that.
Yes, we're very fortunate to be able to have an opportunity to discuss our some issues with our Director of Ag and as well as the Director of Eagle. So we will have an hour time frame with the two directors for the state of Michigan. We look forward to that. That will be at 1 o'clock. And hopefully you guys will be able to join us on that call. This is an opportunity for us to connect with the directors. So we hope that others will be encouraged to jump on and listen to what's going on.
And again, you can register for that by going to micorn.org/events. The other is part 2 of the Grain Marketing Basics Workshop, and that's going to be starting at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, so we have that at 7, and currently we have our delegates that represent Michigan with the National Corn Growers Association. They're live in a meeting right now as we speak as well. So it will definitely be a good day tomorrow when we're all done with this today.
I guess so. Jim, you take care. Always good to talk. Look forward to seeing you again, if not next week, for sure, the week after when you have a chance to talk to us about ethanol. Now, next week, we are going to be talking to a gentleman by the name of Eric Karbowski. Eric is with Michigan State University, and he's going to be talking about farm stress, something that has come to the forefront now. A lot of folks are talking a lot more about farm stress, and it's a good thing that we are, because obviously there's stress everywhere, but especially in agriculture on the farm, we have a lot to deal with, not only of what's going on with outdoors, but what goes on indoors with the farm family. So hopefully you can join us next week at 8 a.m. for Coffee with Corn. And again, if you want more information on all the things going on, all you've got to do is go to micorn.org/events. You can register and you can review the schedule of those upcoming events. So on behalf of Jim Zook, Craig Anderson, and Ryan, our presenters today, I'm Terry Henney. Have yourself a great day today.